What's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time. It's great to chat once again.
Man, it's great to be on this side of the show. You've been on Stadium Miguel a number of times, so it's exciting to talk to you, my friend.
Yeah, glad to have you on, man, for sure. And let's start with this, Dan. It was an interesting season for Florida. Now the attention, of course, has turned to the offseason. Can you explain to me what an executive head coach to the defensive coordinator is and the staff changes or moves that Billy Napier has made? I don't think there's still no offensive coordinator. There's still 2 O-line coaches. There may or may not still be no special teams coach. Your thoughts on what's going on right now behind the scenes with the coaching staff side of things with Billy Napier's group?
Yeah, I know a lot of fans want an offensive coordinator. They want a special teams change. They wanted defensive changes, right? I actually tweeted this the other day. It doesn't seem like whatever Billy Napier does is enough to satiate what Gator fans want. And maybe that's warranted and justified. Maybe some of it's not. What does the executive head coach of defense do? I think it's just a way to be able to pay somebody more money. More than anything, that's what I think it is. I still think Austin Armstrong is going to be the one calling plays with help of Ron Roberts. Austin Armstrong learned from Ron Roberts together. So I think that the collective of them will hopefully make the Gators defense a little bit stronger than it has been the last few years. But you make a change at cornerbacks coach. You make a change at defensive line coach. You bring in a couple of new guys that are younger, right? Will Harris comes from the NFL, maybe 5-6 years of experience as a defensive backs coach. You bring Gerald Chapman in from Tulane, who's a name that kind of came out of nowhere, a younger guy. Again, a lot of experience, talked about well, and definitely a pedigree and a guy that you think could get there one day, but those are just questions that, Gator fans have. And Ron Roberts certainly brings a lot of maturity to the defensive side of the ball. And now it's the opportunity to look at offense. And I wouldn't necessarily say that the Gators are going to be done on offensive changes. You have some contracts running up at the end of January. You have some NFL coaching pedigrees where there might be a tap on the shoulder to say, hey, go check out the job boards in the NFL.
So, Dan, we talk about the Florida Gators football program right now, 5-7 in 2023. Recruiting took a hit on signing day. This stuff with the staff changes. What positive is going on with Florida football? Because I feel like every time somebody talks about Florida lately, it feels like it's negative. What are the signs of hope for the future? Because there's got to be something, right? There's got to be some good going on right now that leads you to believe that things are going to get turned around and there are brighter days ahead.
Sure. I think a couple of bright spots are certainly DJ Lagway, the 5-star quarterback, kind of probably, in my opinion, probably at least the top 2 quarterback in the country coming in. You get LJ McCray, who's one of the best defensive linemen recruits coming in. And certainly Florida, which at one point was ranked 3 and 4 in the recruiting rankings, would have liked to finish there. Certainly didn't happen. The transfer portal, you've got Joey Slackman coming in from the University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year. You get Shamir DK from Wisconsin, who Graham Mertz was passing to for a number of years. You get a couple guys in the portal. You get Pup Howard, unfortunately, from South Carolina, to hopefully bolster that team. And then you add Miles Graham, you add Aaron Charles. It looks like some of the areas where Florida had gaps, they're starting to fill those gaps in a little bit. You make a change at strength and conditioning coach. Defensive backs weren't very good. Corey Raymond maybe just didn't work out at Florida. So you make a change there. Defensive line didn't get enough push, didn't get enough sacks on the quarterback. You make a change there. So you look at it as hopeful optimism and maybe cautious optimism that at least changes are being made, which weren't happening under Dan Mullen, didn't happen under Jim McElwain, and didn't happen under Will Muschamp. Now, then you start to look at it and say, hey, do we have an issue at the top if we have to make all these changes finishing year 2? But that's probably where the optimism lies. Certainly Graham Mertz is serviceable, if not one of the, top half quarterbacks in the SEC. You get back, some young talent on the team. So there's definitely some optimism. There's not a ton of optimism. And I think that's what has Gator fans concerned, because the SEC is obviously very, very challenging each and every year.
Yeah, Dan, you mentioned Graham Mertz, a guy. He's obviously returning for the 2024 season. And admittedly, I was someone that, we didn't know a lot about this guy. And I think it was really popular to kind of trash Graham Mertz and the Florida
Yeah.
Gators last offseason for whatever reason. I had him ranked 14th in my quarterback rankings going into 2023. And, it's funny. It was actually Gator fans that sort of pushed me to release a midseason quarterback rankings, if you will, because it was such an egregious miss. And we just released our way too early quarterback rankings, or excuse me, we actually released, sorry, I missed that, our 2023 postseason quarterback rankings. And I had Graham Mertz top half of the league, had him ahead of Spencer Rattler, which of course sat really well with Gamecock fans. But your thoughts on him leading this Florida offense? I mean, I thought he was obviously a player that, was one of the best storylines in the SEC, overachieved. I mean, do you see any sort of quarterback battle with him and Lagway, or do you think it's Graham Mertz's team and Lagway, you hope to see him just kind of get groomed under Mertz and prepare for that starting role in 25?
I think, Chris, you were 100% right to have a pessimistic view of Graham Mertz coming to Florida. Gator fans did too. There would be some people that have some revisionist history about how they were the one hyping him up. But Graham Mertz wasn't great at Wisconsin. He was a highly recruited guy. I think he was the highest ranked quarterback that Wisconsin had ever signed. And it just wasn't working there, right? And then the head coach gets fired during his third year at Wisconsin. And so he comes to Florida, and Billy Napier goes on his speaking tour and said that they evaluated 30-some-odd quarterbacks, and Graham Mertz was the best option. A lot of people rolled their eyes, and because they had their eyes set on Pratt from Tulane and the guy from Coastal Carolina that's now at NC State, whose name I'm forgetting. But Graham Mertz did exceptional this year. Just under 3,000 yards, got injured in the second to last game of the year, or else he would have thrown for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. All 3 interceptions were tipped balls by the receiver or the tight end. So he did a good enough job. And I think another offseason will push him to be, if he can be just as good next year, I think that Florida's in a good spot. What they need to work on is his ability to move the ball in chunk plays. Florida did a lot of screens, a lot of short outs. He had an 8.1 yards per average throw, right? So needs to see that improve a little bit. They've got some weapons. They've got some young talent. So they'll have to get a little bit better with him being able to move the ball downfield. I think DJ Lagway, just like any highly ranked 5-star quarterback that doesn't have any other options behind Graham Mertz, I think he'll be able to come in. There'll be a couple games where hopefully he'll be able to work in, at least the second half. But I think there's a couple packages where DJ Lagway will come in, and it's just hard to keep a guy that talented. But DJ Lagway still does need some work. He's going to need a lot of work with Ryan O'Hara, who's the quarterback coach, and Billy Napier. But I definitely see an opportunity for DJ Lagway to play some. But I don't think that there's a quarterback battle in Florida next year.
Dan, I ask you this, half joking, half serious. Who made Florida's 2024 schedule? Because, I mean, it is as brutal as you could ask. 11 Power 5 opponents. Your non-conference team. Outside of Samford, you've got Miami, Central Florida, and Florida State. Then you've got the SEC gauntlet, which we're all familiar with. I mean, have you ever seen a schedule like this? I mean, this is crazy. For a coach, especially in a program in Billy Napier and this Gators program that's facing, some adversity. I mean, they do no favors for Florida going into 2024.
I was just looking it up the other day or yesterday, saw this, that Florida's opponent record was 106-50 this year, right? So that's obviously challenging and tough. What Gator faithful are hoping for is that a lot of those schools are making quarterback changes. A lot of them did graduate, a lot of talent. Florida had amongst the youngest rosters in the SEC and in college football last year. So hopefully, they keep talking. Billy Napier, Scott Strickland, who is the athletic director, mentioned they've got to get a little bit older. So hopefully that's what Gator fans are hoping for, that next year they can make that jump up. But man, I'll tell you what, that is a brutal schedule. We have another game with UCF on the calendar in a couple years. We play Miami again in a couple years. We have Notre Dame on the schedule in a few years, Arizona State, Colorado's on the schedule in the future as well. So there's a lot. And Scott Strickland did this before the SEC added Texas and Oklahoma, because we had away games planned at both of those schools. So I get it. I know what you were trying to do. You want to get those premier games. You don't want to play Southeast Louisiana State every game. But Florida's schedule is very, very hard. And it's Billy Napier doesn't have a long leash to not deliver a good team. Florida has 3 straight seasons under 500. So I hate to say that it's going to be a fourth, but it would be a fool of me to not at least throw around the opportunity that Florida might go under 500 again, not just because of the talent of the team, but because of the talent of the schedule that they have ahead. So it could be another brutal year in Gainesville.
Yeah, under 500. What is it? 3 straight years for the first time. I mean, since definitely
the
before Steve
70s.
Spurrier. Since
Yep.
a very very long time. Which again, it's weird. Honestly, it's weird to look at the state Florida football is in, and you see like, last year the Vegas win total of 5.5, and you're like, this is the Florida Gators. Like this
Right.
makes no sense. So that leads me to this question then. And I like Billy Napier. I met him last year at STC Media Days. I think he's a really cool dude. Was very kind to me. But as well as I do, man, it's a game about, it's a results oriented business, and the leash is not long. Like you mentioned, there's not a lot of patience in Gainesville, and that's a program where I think you get 3 years to get it going, and if it ain't rolling in year 3, your seat's going to be scorching. What's the win total Billy Napier has to hit this year? Because I mean, again, even if you've got a really really good team, would struggle to go 8-4 with that schedule. But on the flip side, I think Florida fans, I mean, the expectations are what they are. So, like, are Florida fans, is the administration, are they going to be patient, or is it one of those things where it's, what, damn the schedule, damn this, damn that, win now or you're out?
So the fan base and the administration, I think, are different. I think the fan base has seen enough. I think that there's a lot of there's certainly a big contingent of fans that believe Billy Napier can turn it around. There's a very loud contingent that whatever decision he makes is the wrong decision. I think he's teetering of losing much of the fan base. The administration, on the other hand, Scott Strickland, the athletic director, has already hired 2 coaches, 2 football head coaches. You don't get a third. At a school like Florida where football is king, even though I tell people all the time, Florida isn't historically a great football program. You have some of the 80s, you get put on probation, then you have Steve Spurrier, Ron Zook, Urban Meyer, and then a couple of good years over the next 12, right? But other than that, Florida wasn't very good before that. However, Scott Strickland, the athletic director, you don't normally get the chance to hire 3 coaches. You can't fire 2, hire a third, and everything's just fine and keep it on. Now, the Gator fan base that's upset with Billy Napier is probably even more upset with Scott Strickland, just because basketball hasn't been as good as it was. Mike White probably hung around a little too long. Basketball program looks pretty good this year, but their revenue generating sports have been struggling. So I think Billy Napier is going to be safe because Scott Strickland wants him to Scott Strickland wants to keep his job. And the only way to do that is to throw his undying support behind Billy Napier. Because I think that if it doesn't work out with Billy Napier, Scott Strickland's first to go. And then Billy Napier might be after that. So that's the order of operations I think happens.
So do you think any record then? Because I mean, that's going to be the talk, right? All offseason. That's all we're going to hear is, what's the minimum expectation? Seed is score. Is there a hotter seed in the SEC? Do you see any way? I mean, if they miss a bowl game, like, do you think it's possible? I obviously there's going to be a chain reaction, but I mean, or is it one of those things where Gator fans need to get comfortable and really buy in and dig in their heels with this thing?
Well, they're not going to get comfortable, and they're not going to dig in their heels for 3 straight losing seasons, right? No matter how hard the schedule is, that's what you sign up for in the SEC, and you have to be able to recruit. And this is, as my buddy Paul says, it's a talent acquisition and retention business. And if you've not done a good job of retaining the talent that you need and acquiring the talent that you need to win, then you're not going to be successful with this schedule or even the Alabama schedule or some of the other schedules that are in the SEC this year. I don't know if there's a win total. He has to make a bowl game or else the fan base is completely gone. You have to see drastic improvement across all phases of the game. And you saw some marginal improvement, even though the record was just as bad this year as it was the year before. You saw some improvement by the young guy, Eugene Wilson, a couple other players, but your biggest issues are the offensive line and the defensive line. You just saw it with Michigan in the national championship. You have to win the line of scrimmage. And right now, Florida's not winning either, and that could be the silver bullet for Billy Napier. So we'll see. Still have time in the transfer portal. Have another one, but optimism is not sky high right now, and I say that as a noted sunshine pumper.
Dan, final thing before we get you out of here. You mentioned Gators men's basketball. They got a big one tonight. against Ole Miss. Your thoughts on this year's team? Obviously, we're very, very early in SEC play. Florida drops their opener, hard-fought game against the Kentucky
Yep.
Wildcats, which there's no shame in, losing to one of the best teams in college basketball, which is Kentucky. But thoughts on what Florida might be this year, and again, where's the optimism level for the Gators on the hardwood?
Yeah, this team is made up of almost all transfers. They've got a couple of recruits that they have. Alex Condon is doing very, very well. He came over from Australia. You have a couple of good players on this team. They have an identity. They just have to be able to stay consistent. They're at least going to that Kentucky game. They're the number one number one rebounding team, in the country. So keep that up. They've got a lot of talent. I think that this team's going to make the dance right now. I think if you look at the bracket reports, because Florida's without that big quad one win, they're the first team out. But I think, going through this SEC schedule, the way that they played against Kentucky, if they can keep doing that, keep getting a little bit better. If Riley Kugel can get back into his stride a little bit more like he did against Kentucky, I think Florida will be fine. I think they'll make the dance. Todd Golden has, won the fan base over so far this year. I think they're 10-4 right now. So he keeps going. I think Florida's future is bright, but they've built through the transfer portal, so they'll probably have to do this again next year.
Dan Thompson, Stadium and Gale, again, one of the best in the business when it comes to talking Florida Gators. Dan, let folks know where they can check out your work.
Absolutely. You can follow us on social media. It's Stadium and Gale, Gale. So Stadium and Gale. You can follow me on Twitter at DK Thompson. And thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, let's do it again soon, Dan. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, man. Take care.